All right, so I am super excited to have you here, Chris. This is Chris Howard. He is the founder of Ethos, which is a sober living and recovery coaching
Yeah.
house,
Yeah.
right? And I'm super excited to have you here because number one, I just think you're an awesome human. Number two, you don't just have all the credentials, which you do, and a bachelor in psychology. Like you're a well-versed, educated, trained guy in what you do, but you can decide how much you want to talk about it. But what I really love is that you walk the walk. You have lived what your clients have been through. This isn't like, in theory, it should be like this. You're like, I've been there. I've been at the bottom. And that makes you so amazing. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but he saved our son's life. You saved our family. And like, that is forever. You know, I really believe there's angels that walk amongst us, and you're one of them.
I appreciate that.
So tell us a little bit more about Ethos and what you do with that, what that's all about.
Well, Ethos, the story of how Ethos, and I don't even know if you actually know this, but how Ethos came about was I was actually scholarshiped in the previous program that I went through. Did you know that?
I did.
Did I tell you that?
Yeah, I remember that, but say it again.
So, like,
they don't know.
obviously they don't know. So I had, like, grew up in the Valley, grew up in Burbank, and we were, like, poor. Like, and people, like, even, it's funny because me and my brother, he saw a post that I did, and he was like, what are you talking about? We weren't poor. And I was like, Philip, just so you understand, we had a weekend where there was a rat in our house eating our shit, and our weekend thing was, like, hunting this rat down. And I was like, we lived off food stamps, like, and there were cockroaches. Up until I got sober in 2009, I lived in an apartment that, like, if you took that painting off the wall that's over there, it would be like the size of that painting. It would be roaches, 100,000 of them or something. It's a big ass painting. You know, so super, super poor. And then my aunt basically was like, I had my house got raided the second time. I had started selling drugs at a relatively young age, 14 years old, 15 years old. And then part of that was just a byproduct of the neighborhood I lived in was a bunch of guys who were from broken homes and families that were all, it was like single parent families, and like one or two moms would like hold up shop for us on the weekend so we could all crash there.
Wow.
And there was like multiple families like that. And then the group of guys kind of became family. And I had like a dysfunctional family system. My mom was schizophrenic. My grandmother raised me. You know, my dad ended up going to prison at one point for trafficking weed for the cartels. It was like a whole thing. Yeah.
Welcome
like
to the bottom, folks.
Yeah, literally. So like in that sense, like my resume of like me having a crazy fucked up past or destroying my life, like it was all there.
Nobody could say you don't get it.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah.
I get it.
All right, dude. Yeah, please. And then, you know, whatever ends up happening with that from a young age. And like, really, I was selling drugs because I wanted just money. Like at the end of the day, it wasn't like, oh, and there was the bravado and like, oh, I'm a weed pill drug dealer. And I wasn't hard by anything. I think at that time, everything I emulated was I'm hard, and everyone I ran around gang members and people who, it's interesting, like, funny now, because I don't have, like, a fear of, like, people who are like, even now on the streets, I'll see gang members, I'm like, what's up? Like, they're like, they trip out on me. Well, they trip out on me because they're like, what's wrong with the white boy here? Like, this is insane. Like, and I'm like, oh, no, you're just like a human, and as long as I respect you, usually we're going to be good. Once in a while, there's,
Isn't that amazing?
Out there. Yeah.
See, again, this is what I love about what you just said, because you are so symbolic of that. It's like you can choose the glasses you look through, and you will find what you're looking for.
100%.
And you're choosing to look at it that way, and they're seeing you that way.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, it would, like, I think people are like, and this part of like, we were talking about travel right when I walked in, but like, especially when you travel, like your currency is communication. And
I love that. Your currency is communication.
And the truth is communication in an environment. A lot of times you can't verbally communicate. It's like what is my nonverbal thing, and how can I use my fingers to get through this situation to like kind of breed a connection with some person. They'll actually help me figure it out, even though we can't even speak the same language. So I digress, but
no, that's a good digression though. I love that, because what they even say, right? Communication is like 93% nonverbal. Like the words are 7%. So everything you're saying, and I can't even imagine how that resonates with your world, because I'm guessing the most of the communication is nonverbal with you understanding the clients and what they need and all that.
Well, 100%. I'm, in my opinion, if you're like not cued into that, I don't know how you're a successful clinician. And I'm not saying like psychiatrist, therapist, even like ground staff. If you're not cued into people's nonverbal communication, like I think you're gonna have, and even verbal communication. Yeah, there's often times where when we'll be in like a dynamic with a guy, we're asking him some sort of question, and then, you know, right when the question gets answered, they kind of veer off and start looking at their floor. Their body language shifts, and then you're like, oh, right now is like the time to become curious. And it's not even about grinding down. Like when I was coming up in 2009 through probably 2014 or something like that, I would grind on that. I would be like up your ass until you told me why you did that. I know there was a reason. Where now I'm like, hey, dude, what? I just saw this thing happen. Like, is there something going on? And I realized, like, at that point, I had been trained or indoctrinated in a manner to be a hammer. And I would get a lot of shit done with a hammer.
Right, like they said.
I would. But then over time, I was like, oh, no, I was breeding fear in people.
Yeah, my tool belt needs to be a little fuller.
Yeah. I need to open up the tool belt, and I learned, oh, okay, actually, if I, like, have a little bit of finesse and, like, be accommodating and welcoming to people, they're going to be less like, oh, fuck this guy. They're going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, oh, you're actually really trying to help me. And at that time, my mindset was still the same, is I'm really trying to help you, but the way to help you is to beat this in your head and press on you until you're going to tell me what I need to hear or whatever's going on in your
the ultimate
own head.
Example of you being the ultimate Buddha master is what happened with our son. I will never forget this. And you want to talk about nonverbal power. It's frickin' 3 a.m. We get a call from the cops. Sebastian, our son, was at rock bottom. We come at 3 a.m. We throw on some clothes. We drive there. The cops have him in the car. We're like desperate. We're scared. We had just talked to you the week before. We barely knew you.
It was the same day.
Was it the same day?
It was the same day. It wasn't the week before. It was that day I had to go to the treatment center because they were throwing him out of the other sober living.
Jeez.
And I sat down and had the meeting. And in the meeting with him and Mimi, he bolted out of the office and said, fuck this, took his shit from the sober living, went out and lost. He ate Xanax or something like that.
Yep.
Lost everything that same night.
Exactly.
It wasn't the week before. It wasn't the same
So
night.
is this what tragedy does
this.
to your memory? I was like, you're exactly right. But we didn't know each other that well. And the funny part was, too, I'll never forget, when I said to you, like, you know, acting like I'm interviewing you, like, what's your percentage of success? And, you know, you gave me this ridiculously low number. And you're like, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that's actually good in this industry. So anyway, here we are at 3 a.m. and we're desperate and we're scared. I text this guy at 3 a.m. All of a sudden, this pickup truck rolls up in the middle of darkness, in the middle of the deep valley. Chris steps out of the car. We're like, my wife and I are like in shock that he even answered or saw the text. And I will never forget this. Sebastian went from hostile and torn up. He was definitely out of his mind. He saw Chris. He looked at you. You looked at him. And you saw him go, shh. And I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said something like, are you coming with me? And Sebastian just goes and gets in the car, and that's it. And he wakes up at his, Ethos, and literally saved his life. I really mean that, and saved our family, because any of you listening that have been through this, it just tears your whole family apart, and you saved us. But it's funny because when you said the nonverbal, I'm thinking like that was your mastery. You just were like zenning it, and he picked up on it.
I always feel weird because you're not the first person who tells me this, and the only reason Ethos exists is because of another parent who's like, this is like your gift. But I don't think I'm the one who like saved him. It's always like a weird thing. I think I'm willing to push the envelope in a direction probably most clinicians aren't willing to push in order to get the person to exercise agency, because you and I both know, hey, listen, he tried to bounce out at least 3 times that I remember. And
we were like,
even
Chris,
like the last month,
in.
it was like the last month. Well, even one quick story that is a little bit comical was when he left.
I remember this.
The first time. I will never forget that. I remember that whole day while I was driving over here. I was remembering him. He left like right. It might have been this first or second week COVID got called off.
Right.
And at that point, like if you understand drug addicts, alcoholics, people who have substance abuse, mental health problems, they're very smart and very calculated in terms of when they choose to exercise agency. Like, I can't.
And you
do
always
this.
knew that. You always knew that.
And there's always this element of like, I can't do this because of my depression, or I do this because of my addiction. I do this, and then there's like a rationalization or justification for why something can't be done. But all of a sudden, when like they need to get to the end of the earth to get some shit done, they have the agency.
All of a sudden it's there.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden we can figure it out. Anxiety, all this stuff, and they're having to do some shit. And he bailed out. He took the bus over here. And I remember when he took off, I called you, and you're like, we're pretty sure he's going to be there. And I said, it's all right. You know what? I'm going to drive over there. And I remember I went to the Mendocino Farms down off Ventura.
God.
And by the time I ordered my salad, you were like, he's here. I said, hey, I'm going to eat I remember. I was like, I'm eating my salad. I'll eat my salad and come there. You're like, no worries. We'll be there. And I'll never forget walking in here. And your wife was, I was dying. Because he went off and he turned on the waterworks.
Yep.
And was like, I can't do this. And she was like, I'm so no. She was like literally. She like threw the round. She's like, I'm fucking tired of this. And I remember what she said. I always tell him this, and me and him laugh about it now. Yeah. It's funny how our relationship shifted. But I was like, I'll never forget your mom saying to you. She said something along the lines of like, it's going to be really hard for you to get into a shelter because they're all shut down now because of COVID. Like, it was something gangster.
My wife's a badass.
It was something gangster. And I'll tell you, even in my whole entire career, up until that time, I was 10 or 11, 12 years doing this. And I remember being like, dude, I've coached parents. I didn't coach her on that either. Like, I've coached parents on that, and they can't do that. She was like, I'm fucking done with this.
That's why you're going to be so psyched to have my wife in this interview. But I love hearing this, too, because, like, we're so lost in the trauma. I don't even remember the details as well as
I
you
do remember
that. Was a great scene.
I do remember that. Because there's, like, certain things that transpire with certain, like people who I work with, and then I'm like, oh, these are pivotal moments. And that was a huge pivotal moment. And he was like, he turned on the waterworks, and he was like, no, you're not coming back. Like,
but you did coach us, because I'll never forget, when we locked him out of the house, it was your coaching. You're like, until you lay down the line or whatever, it's not going to happen. Like, and I remember even at the program, certain people saying, we would have been better 2 years sooner if our parents stopped, giving in to us. Yeah. So you did give us the strength. But the other pivot, I don't know if you remember this too, but the other tipping point moment was, and this is, again, speaks to your amazingness. It was like way later. Like, we're thinking, okay, he's got this. He's in the program. He's going to graduate. And then all of a sudden he's like, I'm done. And you, for 1 minute, were like, you know what? Let him go then. It is what it is.
Well, because it was at like 12 months.
Right.
It was like around 14 was when he was supposed to graduate.
Yeah, it was like so close. But you, in your amazing integrity, you still said, let's meet in the park.
I remember that.
And we met in the park, and I was like, oh my God, this guy cares so much about what he does and about Sebastian that he's not letting go. And that meeting in the park, I remember we were all sitting in the grass. Once again, you turned him. And you didn't do it with a hammer. No, you did it with like, what do you want your life to look like? And, you got him there on his own, and then he ended up graduating.
Well, and I remember what that conversation was about, because what I told him was, I go, listen, I've done this a long fucking time. And back in the day, we used to throw people out. Like, and it was old school. Like, you'd get thrown out like on a Wednesday night at 10 o'clock. They'd call your parents then and be like, hey, we just threw him out. Don't let him in. Like, kind of crazy shit. And I was like, listen, but I've seen so many people do what you've done, and it never plays out good because you've already went through so much shit in this house.
Right.
It's going to fucking plague you. And I've watched people relapse over and over again because they made it to like the last leg of the race, and then what bothered them was that they quit. Right. And I was like, dude, to be frank, I'll tell you right now, like, you can leave, and like, I support you with love and kindness. You're going to be kicking yourself in the ass for so long. Like, it almost perpetuates more downfall. It becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But the fact that you know all that so deeply is what makes you so magical. So here's my question for you. So my whole podcast is called The Circle, and it's about what I feel like has made my life great, the circle of control, right? If you only focus on what you can affect and forget everything else. Mm-hmm. And I feel like people letting go of what they can't affect is like an addiction. Like, they know it. Most of them know it's bad for them. They know it's not helping, right? Like, I listen to all these people these days with politics, with wars, all this stuff they cannot make an effect on. And it's consuming them. So I'm really curious to hear from you if you feel like there's an analogy there in your world with addiction and everything else on how do you relate to that circle of control, focusing on what you can control versus what's outside the circle, and how does that tie into how you help people?
Yeah, I mean, the whole philosophy of ethos is, it almost goes against the predominant narrative right now about like you are your mental illness, which, and I don't think that practitioners are intentionally imbuing this philosophy. I just think the medical model has shifted in a major direction where people diagnosis are over identifying with this, and they become their depression, they become their substance abuse, they become their anxieties. That I mean, you'll meet people sometimes and they'll identify with whatever. Oh, I have autism. I have I'm autistic.
Right.
Blah,
It's
blah.
my identity. It's not
their
what I'm going
identity.
through. It's who I am.
Yes, it's my identity. Right. And I think that's highly problematic, because once it becomes part of your identity in that manner, it becomes something, the way people communicate about it is, I can't control it. It's who I am.
Wow.
Right?
So they're putting that outside the circle,
yes,
instead of inside.
Yes. I cannot control my emotional state. And I don't believe in that shit. Which is very a taboo philosophy,
but I'm with you.
And which is funny, because when you look at like the probably most research evidence-based form of psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's branches off that, which is essentially DBT, ERP, which is like the gold standard, like exposure response prevention, like exposure to things that, like, you hate the snake, I'm gonna go to the other side of the room and I'm gonna walk towards you. Tell me when you feel an internal 7.
I love that.
And then I'm just gonna chill here with the snake. Just hang out though. You got to sit through that shit though. And that is the gold standard. The irony is, with OCD, people won't even do it, right? But the whole philosophy of that, back to the circle, is, well, you're creating something that you're learning to control this thing.
Well, tell the story of what you did with Sebastian when he jumped off that cliff and almost died.
Oh, when he did not want to, yeah, and he was like,
That's the snake.
Yeah. He was like, I'm not doing this. And I'm like, dude, listen, that cliff that he jumped off, that he did almost, it was really, really bad situation.
I will never forget hearing your voice. They went on this retreat and Chris called me, and I hadn't heard you have that tone in your voice. You like literally thought he was going to hit that rock and die.
Because I looked over and you could only see where the water, and then I heard the water splash, and I was like, all right, it's fine.
But talk about what you did with him. It's the snake thing,
and that
right?
wasn't the one I was telling him to jump off of. It was another smaller one where I was like, hey, walk you, and it happened the same with our manager Tuck. I'm not going to do this. And like, this cliff is like, it's high. It's probably 30 feet high, but it's like an easy jump in.
Right.
And I'm like, listen, I only want you to jump off the cliff, not to impose my will on you, but because I know what it'll do for you internally. If you're this afraid of it, it's going to be a good thing for you. Especially because it'll be fun. You go jump in the water. Everyone in the community's there rallying behind you.
But you made him do it a second time after he almost died. That's what was so... And he even tells me, I was scared to death, but now I'm over it. Like, if you hadn't made him do the second jump, get close to the snake, he would still be fearing probably heights in general.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because that's what I was talking about. He's like, oh, and you could see it on him. Like, that was real. And this is the thing that is like, where I say, like, okay, maybe I'm like, either I'm truly fucked off, or I'm like evil genius.
Evil
you
genius.
Know what I mean?
I'm going with evil genius.
You know? Like,
that's my next tattoo. Evil genius.
Well, I was looking at you. I go, this is why you and I get along so well.
Exactly.
Look at this.
Yeah. What does it say? Is it a Morfati?
Yeah.
Dude.
That was crazy.
Oh my God, we both, I didn't know that.
I know, I was looking
Wonder
at
Twin
it.
powers activate.
I was like,
yeah,
it was like crazy. I was like, while you were talking, I was like, oh.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude.
Which is, ironically, back to the circle, is like no fate, but like essentially love of fate, right?
Yes.
And it's funny, because why I fell in love with that. Did you ever see Terminator?
Yeah, of course.
The second one with Sarah Connor, and in the movie, there's a part where she's in the desert and she carves into a table, no fate.
Oh wow, I don't remember that scene, but
no fate. And John sees it, and the Terminator's the homie in this one.
Yeah.
Terminator 2. he's like, no fate but what you make. Because in the movie, she knew that Miles Dyson was the reason why this chip got, and she was going to go change. She was creating her fate.
Right.
She was like, I'm going to change this. So the whole philosophy of like this existential thing is like, hey, regardless of what happens, like shit's going to happen this week. I can go down the street, someone hit my car, whatever it is like, this is just a byproduct of existence. And all of it is a necessary thing for me to go through in order to grow as a human being. The only thing I can control to a certain extent is my emotional state. And I can self-regulate it. I can't control the way emotions feel when they hit me, but I can control my response to them, which is, it almost feels like it's like a novel idea. Like you can't say that to people. It's like crazy.
But it is the superpower.
I agree.
I mean, it's like we don't control anything that happens to us. We control 100% how we react and how we choose to think about it. Like this one girl said to me one time, my philosophy is clot quickly. And I love that. Mm-hmm. Like things are going to happen and you'll react, but you can choose to clot quickly. Don't let this linger on more than the time it took to happen. If somebody cuts you off, that's over in 30 seconds. Let it go in 30 seconds. But how do you teach that, and what are examples you see of that? Because one thing I really want people to walk away from this podcast with is not just, yeah, that all makes a lot of sense, but now what? I'm still struggling. What are some things you of all people know this that they can start doing to get themselves in the circle and not putting all their weight on what they can't control?
Exposure. My whole thing is like anything that provokes my fear. Like, a perfect example. I remember when I first got sober, super insecure, like didn't want to go date, and I literally downloaded dating apps not to go hook up with chicks. I would go on dates with chicks who I actually wasn't attracted to.
For training.
Well, and also how do I deal with a potential like conflict situation?
Wow.
How do I deal with a situation where I know I'm going to be slightly uncomfortable, and how do I manage that? Now, I'm not saying everyone should go out and download dating app. And the truth is, but here's the irony. Weird situation plays out. I go out on this date downtown LA, meet this girl. It was abundant off rip. We're like, we are not compatible. Super cool. Had an artist loft in downtown. She said, come to my loft though, meet my dog. Super cool. One date, never saw her again. Years later, I ended up dating this girl, and they were like, it was one of Suicide Girls. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like alternative models, like tattooed models. It was like a huge thing in the early 2000s. So she was a suicide girl. The first girl was. The girl who I ended up dating was a suicide girl. And I was like, oh yeah, I dated this one girl. She texts her and she goes, you know what? That was like the coolest date where there was like zero sexual chemistry, nothing, but just like a great human. And inadvertently, I ended up dating that girl for like a year or so. And it was like this cool thing where it was like, oh, wow, you don't even know how this situation pays forward. It's like, oh, I'm just like not a piece of shit. I walked through the situation. I actually had a pretty cool date with her. Like I remember her all the time. And it wasn't like a negative thing where before me going into it, I was like, oh, this is going to be socially awkward. Da, 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 da.
So again, changing the lenses.
Yes. And the lens was changed by walking through an immense amount of discomfort. And I think that's the thing. It's like, well, nothing... it's interesting because there's a thing I tell the guys in the house now. There's no, because in amongst 12-step culture and I think therapeutic culture in general, there's this idea of like getting into the solution. You need to get into the solution. And I tell people now, there's no solution, there's only trade-offs. Right. Like if you want...
I love that. Listen, say that again. There's no solutions, there's only trade-offs.
Yes. Well, it's like here. You want to live up here and have the beautiful view? How many hours and countless... Everyone can go, oh, you guys just have this house, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, dude, do you know how many times, like, fucking... I thought, like, everything was going to burn down?
Yep.
Like, and meanwhile, there were, like, kids at home, this, that. It had to show up. Yeah. And it's like this... I actually use this a lot with moms because a lot of parents are, like... falling, I feel like, kind of captive to the whole medical model. Well, he can't do this because of his depression and anxiety. He can't do this. And I said, hey, are you the birth parent of this kid? Because some people adopt the kid. And I go, either way, it is what it is. But you are, right? Yeah. So you remember, like, when that kid was an infant and all of you were sick and you were potentially shitting yourself or vomiting on yourself at some point. You still had to make the kid food. Your mental health was completely in the gutter. And you somehow... You had to muster the skills to persevere another day.
Exactly.
We need to be imbuing that same philosophy in the kids. Listen, there's days I don't want to get up and go do work. There's days where My girlfriend does something that irritates me, and I have to self-regulate, walk through it. Okay, cool. She's got me pissed off. Let me handle the obligations. And like, I think for me, my coping strategy is like how my service to other people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because for me, it is an insulator. And even when I was a drug dealer, it's like funny things. Like, I was kind of like, there would be people who would be sick, and I'd be like, here, just come by. I'll give you like. I was still trying to be of service. Like, you're either wired that way or you're not. In my mind, in my mind, I'm like, you're wired that way or not.
Right goal, wrong tool.
And it's so funny because my old drug dealer. This is a weird part of the story. No one really knows this. I don't feel weird sharing it. My old drug dealer. I was such a bad drug addict. When I got sober, he paid my cell phone bill for like the first 2 years of my sobriety because he was like, bro, you're going to fucking die. Me and him are actually friends. Obviously, he doesn't sell drugs anymore, but me and him are, and he, to this day, he was like, yeah, bro, like I literally, and I was making him a substantial, 10, 15 grand a month. Jeez. And he was like, like, yeah, at that point, and he was like, yeah, no, bro. I was like, you're going to fucking die. It doesn't matter anyways. Because I was eating 100 Norcos a day, 25 Valiums. I'm like, my tolerance. And even when I went into treatment, the woman in treatment was like, you're a liar. And to her defense,
she think you should have been dead.
Well, and like it would this pissing contest that happens amongst drug addicts. Like it's a huge thing I talk about in families.
The story needs to be bigger to justify their failure.
Yes. Who was well, and then like that's the problem with treatment a lot of times, right? You send young people into an environment who have nothing to relate on other than the fact that they're there for mental health, substance abuse problems.
Right.
When they get in, it becomes a pissing contest for who's more fucked up.
Wow.
Because
that's their identity, right? They're doubling down on their identity at the time.
I think it's their identity. I also think, especially amongst men, like we have to endure hardship. Right. I genuinely like
caveman
believe this.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and hey, if you're a gnarly drug addict, you've had to endure some shit.
Right.
Listen, even as business people who are never had substance abuse problems, they'll talk back about, I remember walking through like these things. There is elements of
said, man.
Of our egos that need to be like challenged.
And it could be productive stuff like building a business, or it could be not productive stuff like almost killing yourself. With drugs.
Well, it's interesting. I was watching this the other day, but they were saying like majority, like there's a high propensity of like higher level executives and entrepreneurs who, when you look at their upbringing, they were raised in dysfunctional backgrounds.
Interesting.
Like extremely dysfunctional backgrounds. And you go, well, and the guy's breaking it down. He's a social scientist, and he goes, yeah, but you got to think about it. And you know this as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Dude, there are times where everything is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And like completely. Market shifted. This has changed. You're having to onboard new people, blah, blah, but like there's shit going on all the times. And if you're raised in it, you're like, oh yeah.
It's funny you say that because like, my upbringing was pretty ugly too, with my mom and father and stuff. You've heard this in past episodes. But it's funny you say that because I'll never forget. I was 25, opened my second restaurant, and it's like 1 a.m. and it closed, and now I'm like varnishing the bar because it needed that and getting ready for the next day. And my manager looks at me and goes, "What drives you? Like, what are you doing?" Because it was just like, and you saying that makes me think. Like, I think it's funny, right? It's even like success and working hard can be a coping mechanism for what you've been through or whatever.
I believe that 100%. Well, it's interesting because like I made like a really, I didn't like know, like I'm financial literacy within like last year. Like I had like money in the bank, and my aunt was like, dude, this should be sitting in money market. Like you probably lost. Like, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know that. But my mindset, like my relationship this last year, and it is continuing to shift around like money, because I had such a poverty, like just save.
Mattress.
And the truth is like, oh, I actually probably could have made more money had I been like, oh, if I hire this person, if I did this, and I'm just entering that phase of, and luckily I'm 39, like, but I'm just entering that phase of entrepreneurship where I'm like, oh shit, like I managed to generate like a decent amount of money, but like the mindset that I had of like, I never want to be fucking poor. Yeah. Like, and here's the deal. I always hear this, and me and my brother talk about this pretty frequently now, is like the idea of like money can't buy you happiness. Right. I agree that it can't buy you happiness, but it will buy you peace of mind.
Well, yeah, I was joking. I say, if you're going to be unhappy, I'd rather be poolside.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
You know, like,
100%.
let's not kid ourselves.
Well, yeah, I'm like a huge believer is like people who say that shit have never truly been poor. You've never really, really fucking been poor. And like to me, I'm like, it's not gonna buy me happiness. I don't care about money for the purpose of like, oh, I need more money. If the truth is if I made more money, I would probably help more people, 100%. Right. I care about it in the sense of security. Yeah. That's it. Like, I never want to, number one, put my kids through, like, that type of shit or have to endure, like, living in a roach motel, you know? And it's weird because my brother, it's funny, we have, like, TikToks. And now the videos we send are like, because they have the videos of people cleaning houses, and then there are all these like German cockroaches.
And you're like, that was our childhood.
No, it's like literally trips me
out. You know, it's funny you say that because Nadia is the same way. You know, I adore my wife. You guys have heard me talk a million times. But, you know, we've been together 30 years. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that we finally like figured it out because like she kept being in a place of scarcity, you know, and I come from abundance. Even though I had a terrible childhood, we did have plenty of money, at least until we didn't. But I always just had the mindset of like, we'll figure it out. Yeah, I'll make it happen, right? Yeah. I just have never worried. She comes from the opposite. She had to help pay the rent working at Burger King. They had no furniture and slept on the floor in Brentwood, you know, until they got enough money to buy furniture when they came from Italy via Iran. And that's what it was. This person said to me, which I finally needed to hear, they go, would you stop showing her spreadsheets? It's not about the facts. Like, it's emotional for her. It's scarcity. She's just in fear. But to her credit, talk about getting back in the circle, she let it go. She finally is like, you know, I said to her, I go, it's been 30 years and we keep having a better life every year. At what point are you going to be comfortable? And she just, something snapped for her, and I'm so impressed because now she's like, you know, we'll have a bunch of deals fall apart in real estate, and she's like, we'll figure it out. Yeah. And it's really been rewarding, but you're right. That's a deep ingrained feeling to come from scarcity and like
100%.
Yeah, and 100%. It's better to have it like under the mattress and make zero interest than to take a chance it could be gone, right?
Yeah. Well, and I don't. And the truth is now I'm like, oh, I'm like I don't like not being educated, especially because I ended up going back to school. I went to UCLA. Yeah, you got your. And like now that I'm like, oh, I need to like do way more work on this shit. Like I'm fine with now. I'm like, oh, this is stupid. Like, I just missed out on, like, a major life hack. I'm probably, like, 5 years behind. Yeah. You know?
But you're not.
But I'm not.
Yeah.
But I'm not. Because at the end of the day, it's, like, funny. I think about all the time I, like, spent selling drugs, all this stuff. And I deal with a lot of people who come in, like, oh, I fucked my whole life. I'm like, listen, like, the truth is, like, you might actually have, like, went through a grad school. You don't even fully understand.
That's what I was saying about Sebastian. You made our son. He's 24 now. But he has the emotional maturity and kind of understanding of people in the world of like somebody way older. So it wasn't as much of a setback as it was a reset and a, you know.
I know, and that's what I constantly,
learning.
And like I'm still grinding down on them. I'm like, bro, none of this shit. Like you're in your fucking mid-20s, dude. None of this shit, like, fuck up. Yeah. Dude, make all the mistakes right now, dude. You're good, bro.
Just fail fast. Fail fast.
Go. You want to go do this? Go do it. When you recognize it ain't working anymore, like, just figure it out right now. But there's, like, no impetus. Like, we'd be on the thing when he was out in Atlanta. I need to grind. Like, not really, bro. You should just save money, go on dates, meet as many people out here. I told them, one thing I wish someone would have told me is expand your network now, though.
Yeah.
Like, network, I didn't. Like, I understood it in selling drugs. I think that was what was good, where I was good with people. Yeah. But I think network is like, oh, it's not like, what is it? You show me your network, I'll show you your net worth. Right? And I always just say, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Right? I'd be like, whatever. But the truth is like, the more I've surrounded myself with people who are like growing in a similar direction, like, I'm like, oh, yeah, no, this totally like makes sense. And like putting yourself out there and like exposure, right? Yeah. Like, it feels uncomfortable. I think if one skill I could teach all the guys in the house, and they have to learn it in the house a little bit, is rejection.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to learn how to take losses.
I would say, not to use the drug analogy, forgive me, but I would say no has to be your crack. Like, selling real estate, all the things I've done, raising money, no has got to pump you up. Yeah. You've got to get to where no is lights the wick, not makes you all sad, because it's inevitable. It's just
100%.
And I also, like, you've alluded to this too, which I love, is I've always said, nothing great in life happens till you're sick to your stomach. If you are comfortable, you're screwed.
Yeah.
You've got to be uncomfortable to get to that next place, right?
100%. Well, and even all the data now about like, everyone was doing running. Everything is really centered around, especially women. It's a whole thing where like they get leaky bones.
Oh, wow.
When I forget, there's something that happens that has to do with like menopause and stuff like that, and they actually have to lift heavy weight. We all do,
right?
Like in general. But
I love that.
You have to endure like welcoming comfort.
Bravo.
Actually isn't really good for us.
Bravo.
Like you kind of want to be low level, uncomfortable, like 90% of the time. Like I'll go today and I'll go there's a sauna right by my house. It's like 200 degrees.
I love it.
And I'll go push it to like, I never go above like 30 minutes. But even at 15 minutes, a lot of times I'm like, dude, this is horrible.
But you feel
Why
better.
am I doing this? And then 30 minutes later, an hour later, I get out. I'm like, oh, like nothing. No one can do anything to bother me right now.
That's why I always say, like, why do I cold plunge in the morning? Because if you can wake up and do the thing you want to do least, the rest of the day is easy.
Yeah. I started doing CrossFit recently for that. It's horrible.
That stuff's painful.
I just don't push. I don't push the weight.
Yeah.
Especially with like the
those
clean
cowbells
and jerks.
scare the heck of me.
I love the kettlebells.
Oh my God, those things scare me.
They're so good. They're so good.
So give me one or two, if you can think of it, ways that people can help themselves stay in the circle of control. So one you said was get closer to the snake, get closer to your fear. But how about these things like, oh, the Ukraine war, oh, there's crime in the city, oh, there's the politicians. How does somebody go, I know I don't want to focus on that, but I keep feeling the weight of it. Is there anything you could suggest that like helps people get to that better place?
Well, I like not to go down like because it like veers on like conspiracy theory land, but you can like read up Operation Paperclip, stuff like that. Like that, like being on your phone you're a drug addict.
Right.
We're all are.
Right.
At the end of the day, so on my phone here, I don't have any social media on there. Nice. I have a separate phone because of work stuff.
Oh, interesting. So there's one idea right there.
I do not have any social media on my day-to-day work phone.
Love that.
Because you have to understand, like the truth of the matter is we're all being manipulated on that shit. And that's not like my opinion.
No, it's true.
Like they have the Netflix documentary.
Oh, yeah.
It's like abundantly clear. And what's funny is even with everyone knowing that, even with looking at the election stuff, Biden, Trump, whatever, blah, 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 Ukraine, all this shit, everyone knows, but everyone is a willing participant in it.
Bravo. But you just solved it. It's like if you want to stop doing drugs, don't have them in your pocket.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? So you're saying the same thing. First step is, have the social media maybe only in your iPad at home so you don't have it on the phone when you're out and about during the day or something.
Well, even with my girlfriend now, she has 2 kids, and we're talking about potentially having a kid, and I was like, dude, like the way there's no.
Did you just say you're potentially talking about having a kid?
Yeah.
Wow.
But
man.
I'm not like I don't own a TV myself.
That's awesome.
For the same reason, I don't know. I literally don't
have a TV at home.
And no, I don't. But here's the deal, because I can if I want to watch something on Netflix, I can grab my iPad or whatever.
Right.
But I don't want that shit a part of my kid's life because. Listen, you can't control how they're being influenced by that. And when you look, the data is abundantly clear, especially for little girls. There is no way, and she has 2 girls. There's no way I would allow my daughter to get on that shit. And she goes, okay, we'll see what happens if you have a daughter, Chris, because you don't know what it is. I said, we'll see what happens.
But see, she's already, and I'm sure she's amazing in 100 different ways, but she's already like defining that it can't be changed, which is like you said.
No, she's like, I'd love for you to help me with that. Like, she's actually not
giving
like, she's like, we'll see. Yeah. I would love for you to fucking.
But I have a friend that does it. I should hook you guys up because you're the same mold. They have 3 kids. He's wildly successful entrepreneur, super successful, but he's constantly surrounding them with arts and crafts. Yep. Like we sold him this house, and they took the pool and emptied it because they were going to tear it out. And they had all their friends come over and had a painting party. They got to paint the entire inside of the pool. They're always doing projects. They have no TVs. So you're right. It can be done, and these kids are wildly creative and peaceful because of it.
Well, and back to the circle analogy, like the time is to build the circle. Yeah. Right, of your community.
Yeah.
Right. You're not building You might be building some community with this, right? We're able to connect with people. I think
Right.
there's value and merit to all of this stuff. But the truth is like this. I was like, even when you sent me a text, I was like, dude, I actually just want to come here to hang out.
Yeah,
with you.
I love
like
it.
literally, I was like, I'll
love
just
it.
come to hang out with
You're
you.
the
You know what I
best.
mean? So at the end of the day, is like, I just think people need to get off this shit as much as possible.
Well, you just brought up the most obvious great point too. Is it's like the solution is connection. Like if you're connecting with people more, doing this more, you're just gonna be in a happier place, and you're not gonna be doing that other stuff more. You don't have time to think about next door if you're out having a coffee, or one of these apps. You're connecting, you're feeling good about people and things.
Well, which is funny because I have like a lot of friends who are like hardcore progressively liberal, and I think living through COVID has made me slightly more conservative, and this will be like probably the part of the conversation where some people, I'm not a conservative person. I've lived off food stamps my whole life. I believe in social
But you're an
welfare
open-minded person.
100%. But what's interesting, I find very funny is like, and I've found this quite often with like my friends who are hardcore progressive liberal, is like their antipathy towards like conservatives and stuff like that, but their lack of emotional awareness around their response to it. I'm like, oh, like this is actually it. Yes, these are byproducts, these are triggers that set you off, but your real problem is that you can't emotionally self-regulate. People say dumb shit to me all the time,
Right.
and I go, okay, like I can take that and
You
put
just
that
go,
in me.
let it go.
It either rests in me, or I go, hey, we don't agree on this thing.
Yeah.
That's all. That's fine. We don't agree. We don't agree on this one topic, but that doesn't make me like a piece of shit, and it doesn't make you a piece of shit.
Thank you for saying that. I've been talking about that like crazy. Like if everyone's default could be not I got to be right and convince you, but why does Chris think what he thinks?
Yeah.
If we could all just stay curious. So, but now it's lunchtime. Being a chef, I love to cook, and so that's one of the things I do to try to lure these guys in for the interviews. So we are gonna have a little Thai shrimp.
Love it.
I've seared them, and here's a little secret when you're cooking shrimp: just the teeniest little bit of sugar, a little sprinkle. It kind of brings out the sweet flavor of the sea in the shrimp.
Okay.
And I've got some kaffir lime leaf, some chilies, coconut milk.
Kaffir
Kaffir lime leaf is the culinary stamp of Thailand. When you have it today,
Oh,
you're
I
gonna
know
go,
what- yeah.
oh, that's the taste I get. It's
Yeah.
always in the tom yum soups and all this
Yeah.
stuff. This beautiful. It's like if I could wear it, I would. It's like a perfume.
Uh-huh.
And then we're gonna switch to Italian and have a killer bolognese. But man, I am so freaking glad to have had you on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing human. Such a great person. Thank you, brother. And amor
Appreciate
fati, baby. That's what
I
it's
know,
all
look at
about.
I was like looking at it. I was like, it's so crazy.
I love that. Love you,
It's
brother.
hilarious. Love you too.